So, if you have an emergency where you have somebody drowning, what sorts of measures might you go through to save a person who's drowning?
Jump in.
You might jump in, okay, might swim, throw them a life, or in the case when Benjamin almost drowned, we're yelling at the lifeguard, right? If you have a medical emergency, you know someone's choking or something, what you do? You might do what? Right. What's that? Do the Heimlich. If you have a mechanical issue, right? You might call some friends or get your tools out. The point is, the nature of the peril determines what type of salvation is required. The nature of the peril determines what type of salvation is required. So this week, we're spending a lesson talking about sin in a Sunday school class that's supposed to be about redemption accomplished and applied. But in order for us to understand that redemption accomplished and applied, we must understand that which we're redeemed from, that which we're saved from. If we're going to understand how it is that Christ satisfies and he makes complete satisfaction for our sin, we have to know the problem that he's addressing. Right? When you and that holds true for all of the ways in which God has delivered his people in the Old Testament as well, as they're all pointing towards Christ. You know, how is it that we are to understand justification in Christ if we don't understand something about legal guilt? How is it that we understand cleansing in Christ if we don't have some understanding that sin makes us messy and defiled? How are we to understand reconciliation if we don't have some idea of alienation? How are we to understand redemption if we don't have some idea of bondage and slavery? So we're going to spend a little bit of time today looking at the nature of sin. But we're going to do it in a little bit more, even though we don't have a lot of time, in a more expanded way than typical. In Genesis 3, remember we weren't there not too long ago. Genesis 3. I guess it's probably longer ago than I think. Maybe a year. Okay, maybe a year. In Genesis 3, we have the fall of Adam. And we immediately see the effects of sin. Can you guys help me out? What were some of the effects of sin that we see in the fall? Shame. And how is that evident? We really want to look at the images of sin.
They were naked.
Okay. They're trying to hide. Okay. What else? Blaming. Yep. Like, yeah, trying to shift guilt. What else?
Death or sacrifice, like the animal that God killed for.
Okay. Yep. Because there was the promise of death, and then we see that death fulfilled in the death of a substitute as God clothed his people with the skins of animals. What else? I mean, this is a gold mine of our understanding of sin.
Curses.
Okay.
As a result of sin.
Like.
The curse of man having to toil the ground.
Okay. Okay.
Consequences to others. It went to their children all the way down.
Right.
It didn't stop it then. It wasn't like a private thing.
Yes. It was public. Yes. It was not just for him, but for all those he represented as well. Yeah. What else?
Well, enmity between them. Enmity between them and God.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So we see the alienation between God and man, an alienation between man and his wife. We see a breakdown in man's vocation. We see the consequences that extend to not just Adam, but Adam and his offspring. Romans 5, if you jump over to Romans 5, verses 12. This is a passage that can seem complicated, but we'll try to knock it down a little bit. Romans 5. Let's see. Evan, would you boldly read verses 12 through, read verses 12 through 14.
12 to 14?
Yep.
Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. For sin indeed was in the world before the law was given. But sin is not counted where there is no law. Yet death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sinning was not like the transgression of Adam, who was a type of the one who was to come.
Ben, would you read 15 through 17?
But the free gift is not like the trespass. For if many died through one man's trespasses, much more have the grace of God and the free gift by the grace of that one man, Jesus Christ, abound for many. And the free gift is not like the result of that one man's sin. For the judgment following one trespass brought condemnation, but the free gift following many trespasses brought justification. For it, because of one man's trespasses, death reigned through that one man, much more will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ.
Therefore, as one trespass led to the condemnation for all men, so one act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all men. For as by one man's disobedience the many were made sinners, so by one man's obedience the many will be made righteous. So, what are some of the descriptions there that we have for Adam in his sin? We have Adam's sin. What do we see are some of the language that's attached to so the consequences of that sin?
Death reigned from Adam to Moses.
We have death. What else? Another word.
Transgression.
Okay. Transgression. Anybody know the difference between a sin and a transgression? We actually use transgression as part of a definition of sin, but
Transgression is crossing a line you shouldn't, and sin is missing a mark that you should.
yeah. So sin is not doing what you should be doing, and transgression is doing something you're not supposed to do. So transgression is like you cross a line. God says this is the line, don't cross, and you cross it. You're transgressing the law. God tells you to do something, you don't do it, you're falling short. So our catechism has the definition of sin. What is sin? Sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the law of God. Right? So, we have sin and transgression. And what's another C? The C word here. Condemnation. Now, in Christ, it says, right? We have over against sin and transgression. What do we have? Okay, obedience or righteousness. Okay. Over against condemnation. Justification. And over against death. There's no way to get you all to see this. It's all right. It's chicken scratches anyway. Over against death. Life. Okay. Now, we are very inclined, and we easily in the church today, we look at this side and we think, yes, this is great. We are saved not on our own. We're saved by a representative, somebody else. We're saved by Christ. And we are perfectly willing to have Christ's righteousness be our righteousness. We're perfectly willing for Christ's justification to be our justification. We're perfectly willing for Christ's life to become our life. However, we like all this covenant representation here, but when you talk about covenant representation here, people get all upset about it. They want to, okay, no, wait, how do you mean Adam sinned and then that made us sinners? What do you mean his sin is our sin? Wait, how come we're guilty for Adam's sin? Or how come we're condemned in Adam? We're okay being justified in Christ. We like covenant representation there, but here we don't see it. Well, what's Paul's point here? Paul's point is that it is a parallel understanding. If we're going to understand our salvation in Christ, we have to understand that we are guilty of sin, condemned in our sin, and worthy of death in Adam. Adam was our covenant representative, and so in him we all have fallen. So I have the question 16 of the Catechism. Did all mankind fall to Adam's first transgression? The covenant being made with Adam, not only for himself, but for his posterity, that is his descendants, all mankind descending from him by ordinary generation, sinned in him and fell with him in his first transgression. Through one man, the many were made sinners. So we are all guilty. So what we described in Genesis 3, alienation between God and man, alienation between man and other humans, shame, guilt, deserving of death, all of that describes Adam describes us who are in Adam. And so it's become kind of the general summary of theologians to talk about Adam, the effect of Adam's sin on us in terms of two main terms, guilt and pollution. So guilt is a legal term, right? When you go and you sit in, I just got called for jury duty. I got it postponed, but I've sat in a jury for a trial. When you get called, eventually you have to go away to a room and you have to decide whether he's guilty or not guilty. That language makes perfect sense when we're talking about a courtroom. But sometimes we think over theologically about these things when we're talking about it from the Bible. The Bible is using here legal courtroom language to help us understand our issue with sin. We are declared guilty. The jurors have returned, they have their verdict. And regarding all of us, when we're outside of Christ, we are found guilty, legally. Pollution has more to do with our particular state. Man's particular state is that we are lacking righteousness and we have the presence of actual sin. See the difference there? Somebody could be, like, who's actually done a crime, could be called not guilty, right? Doesn't that happen sometimes? Right? But or somebody who's not done a crime become guilty of a crime, right? That's a legal distinction. And that legal distinction is not necessarily attached to the actual state of the person who's guilty or not guilty, right? Because think about it, right? We're declared not guilty, but have we sinned? Absolutely. So there's not a necessary connection. But then it often is connected, though. And then pollution is the actual state of somebody who actually has done the crime, is that they are polluted in that. And then total depravity is the corruption of every aspect of our being by sin. And what we mean by that is sometimes theologians have tried to make a distinction that, like, our moral bent is sinful, but intellectually, our reason, that kind of stuff hasn't been affected. Where, like, you read the New Testament, you read the Old Testament, like, they were darkened in their understanding, futile in their thinking. Sin affects every aspect of our being. And so that's why even our righteousness can be seen as filthy rags. It's every part of who we are. Even the things that look pretty pleasing are tainted by sin. So before we go to the next section, what I want to do is have everybody kind of, I was going to break up. It's kind of bigger groups now. Break up into two groups and look at two passages and list out the descriptions of sin in those two passages. So maybe we'll split it like right there. Is that all right? Yeah, bam, there. And so we'll have over here Isaiah 1, 2 through 20, and then over here Isaiah 6, 1 through 13. And I want you to work together and come up with a list of the descriptive terms of sin and what it ends up communicating about sin for us. So this is Isaiah 1. So these are lengthier passages, so it's going to take a little bit of time. Isaiah 1, 2 through 20. Over here, Isaiah 6, 1 through 13. Okay. Now, you'll see like there's a variety of language here used to describe sin. Some of it is there's the legal terminology like guilt. There's the visual aspects of things being like unclean or stained. But you have physical aspects too, right? Over here, you guys had, I don't think they were even made the list. You had you said it when you were over here. Sickness, the whole head is faint. The blindness, you guys both I think had blindness. Physical, it's portrayed physically as a breakdown of the body. Lame, blind, deaf, right? What's that? Putrefying, yes. Both of you had something to the effect of alienation, removed from the presence of God, in some way there. There's imagery of darkness, foolishness, under curse, rebellion, lie versus truth, lame versus whole, lost versus found, ruin versus whole, unnatural, like Romans 1, unnatural. All this language, this rich, diverse language, we're going to have something that can deal with all of this, right? Just like if you have, somebody who's drowning, you maybe get a lifeguard. Somebody who's sick, you might have to get a doctor. Somebody, your car's broke, you might have to get a mechanic. Like, what if sin were a description of all of that? you would need a mechanic, a lifeguard, a doctor, all in one person. See, we have sin here is portrayed, it's multifaceted. It's, the tendency is to absolutize one aspect of sin or another. But there's a reason there's multitude of different types of sacrifices, multitude of different images of God's salvation in the Old Testament, because we have to deal with every aspect of sin. In this this multifaceted perspective, as we're looking at sin, we're led to having a multifaceted solution for sin. I think I gave you the illustration one time that it's a common thing amongst folks that like in the charismatic movement to say the blood of Christ washes sin away. It doesn't cover sin. Like that's an Old Testament thing. They'll say covering. It washes away. It doesn't cover. Well, it depends on what perspective of sin you're looking at and how it affects us. See, it's not necessarily they're exclusive to one another, but they're different ways of addressing different aspects of our sin. What's more is I want you to notice that in this imagery, particularly with respect to like the body, the lame, the blind, the deaf, and you can go through the book of Isaiah and you'll see like over and over, blind and deaf, they're big themes. When you come to the New Testament and you're asking questions about redemption accomplished versus redemption applied, remember last week we went through a list of those passages and I asked you, is this redemption accomplished or this redemption applied? Well, when you get to all these healing miracles of Jesus or his disciples in the Gospels, is he trying to communicate to us, look, we can heal blind and we can heal the sick. Look at all physical illness has now gone away. Or, based upon a rich understanding of sin, he is illustrating in a physical manner what his work is going to be in a spiritual manner. He's going to open eyes, heal broken people, open their ears. This is where many people, they look at these miracles and they're like, hey, yeah, this is the way the church ought to operate. We ought to be doing all these things. Well, there's another perspective. If you look at it from the point of redemption accomplished, we see, the Old Testament has illustrated sin this way so many times that maybe he's pointing us towards something. I was going to save this a little bit, but I might have shared this with some of you. So in Mark, especially, Mark, it's a beautiful picture in Mark. We have in Mark a couple of waves of things that happen, where the disciples, there's some sort of feeding miracle, there's some sort of followed by some sort of controversy with the Pharisees and religious leaders and some sort of journey, and there's this couple cycles going on here. And in those cycles, we have Jesus healing a blind man. And he has to do it twice. You know the story? Like, I see like people moving like trees. And then Jesus like has a mulligan and he heals them and then really heals them. Right? Well, what's going on there? He's illustrating a spiritual truth that is in regards to his disciples. See, the disciples were part of feeding 5,000 and they doubted. And he says, are you doubting? Right? So there's a problem, and he specifically words that doubting in terms of being blind and deaf. He specifically refers to it that way in those cycles. They're doubting whether he can feed how are we going to feed all these people? He says, why do you still doubt? And he feeds 5,000. Well, then later on, and then they have a controversy with the Pharisees, and they have a cross. Then later on, they're up against feeding 4,000. This is the second time there's a feeding miracle. And they're still doubting. They're still not seeing. Even though they had the 5,000, now they're down to 4. There's 1,000 less. And they're still not seeing. But it gets worse than that. It gets to a point where there's only the 12 of them in a boat, and they don't have enough bread. And they're like, hey, what are we going to do? We're going to starve. Wait a minute. He fed 5,000. He fed 4,000. I think he can figure out 12. Right? We look at it, and we're like, oh, duh. We see, because it's been laid out for us. But while they're going through it, they're not seeing. And so what's being described, and those two cycles climax with Peter's confession that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. It climaxes, finally, they get it. So the healing miracle of this blind man that happens twice is only an illustration of the work that's happening in the life of the disciples. They've seen a little in the feeding of the 5,000. They're seeing a little bit more now, and they finally get it. So this radically changes the way you're understanding and reading the miracles in the New Testament. Now, rather than seeing it's part of the way the church just operates, we're seeing, no, this is specifically because Christ is here. He's ready to accomplish our salvation. It's specifically happening to illustrate what he's going to do. Does that make sense? Okay, so because we're going to look at like the Old Testament sacrifices, we're going to see how they play into all this multifaceted perspective. But then we're going to look at some of the miracles and the parables and see how they are building on that. And then we're going to look at the specifics regarding the atonement of Christ. But any questions? Okay, let's sing the doxology, and then we'll set up for the service.